America spent billions of dollars preparing to fight an aircraft that never really existed. Not literally. The airplane was real. The problem was that nobody knew what it could actually do. When the Soviet Union unveiled the MiG-25 Foxbat, Western intelligence was stunned. It looked faster. It looked stronger. It looked unbeatable. Military analysts warned that America might be falling behind. Some feared the Soviets had built a fighter so advanced that nothing in the American arsenal could match it. And during the Cold War, falling behind was not an option. So the United States responded the only way it knew how. By pouring enormous resources into creating a new air superiority fighter, one designed specifically to hunt and destroy this terrifying Soviet aircraft. The result would become one of the most successful fighters ever built. A jet so dominant that decades later its combat record still sounds almost impossible. More than 100 aerial victories, 0 air-to-air combat losses. The irony, the Soviet superfighter that inspired it turned out to be far less capable than anyone in the West had imagined. But the American fighter built to destroy that myth became a legend. This is the story of how fear, uncertainty, intelligence failures, and Cold War paranoia accidentally gave the world the F-15 Eagle. And how a fighter designed to defeat a misunderstood enemy became one of the greatest aircraft in aviation history. To understand how this happened, you have to go back to a time when the world lived under a constant shadow. A time when school children practiced nuclear attack drills. A time when entire governments believed that a single mistake could trigger the end of civilization. The Cold War was not fought through massive battles between American and Soviet armies. Instead, it was fought through technology, intelligence gathering, espionage, military build-ups, and a relentless race to gain an advantage before the other side could. Every new missile, every new submarine, every new aircraft was viewed not merely as a machine, but as a potential shift in the balance of power. Victory wasn't measured in territory. It was measured in who could innovate faster. At the end of World War II, the United States stood alone as the world's dominant power. Its industrial base was unmatched, its economy was booming, and, perhaps most importantly, it possessed the atomic bomb. For a brief period, America held a level of military superiority unlike anything seen before or since. But that advantage began disappearing faster than anyone expected. In 1949, the Soviet Union successfully detonated its first atomic weapon. Suddenly, America no longer possessed a monopoly on nuclear power. The strategic landscape changed overnight. What followed was an arms race unlike any in human history. Throughout the 1950s, American leaders watched with increasing concern as Soviet achievements appeared one after another. The USSR developed hydrogen bombs. Soviet missile programs expanded rapidly. Then came the moment that shocked the world. In October 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the first artificial satellite ever placed into orbit. Today, Sputnik might seem insignificant compared to modern spacecraft, but at the time its impact was enormous. Millions of Americans looked up into the night sky knowing that a Soviet-made object was passing overhead. The launch created a psychological shockwave across the United States. If the Soviets could launch satellites into space, many wondered, could they also launch nuclear weapons across continents? The fear wasn't entirely irrational. The same technology capable of sending a satellite into orbit could eventually be used to deliver warheads thousands of miles away. Newspapers were filled with alarming headlines. Politicians demanded action. Military officials worried that America was falling behind in critical areas of technology. Whether those fears were fully justified didn't really matter. Perception often becomes reality in geopolitics. And during the Cold War, perception could drive billion-dollar decisions. As the years passed, the competition intensified. The skies became one of the most important battlegrounds of the Cold War. Air superiority had proven decisive during World War II, and military planners understood that future conflicts would likely be no different. The nation that controlled the air would enjoy enormous advantages on the battlefield. As a result, both superpowers invested heavily in developing faster, more capable aircraft. The United States introduced increasingly sophisticated fighters and bombers. The Soviet Union responded with designs of its own. Each side constantly monitored the other's progress. Intelligence agencies worked around the clock, trying to determine what their rivals were building behind closed doors. Sometimes they succeeded. Other times they relied on educated guesses. And educated guesses can be dangerous, especially when the stakes involve national survival. By the early 1960s, American military planners were already looking ahead to the next generation of air combat. Existing aircraft had limitations. Technology was advancing rapidly. New threats were emerging. The Air Force needed a fighter that could dominate future battlefields. But while American engineers were discussing tomorrow's aircraft, reports began arriving about a mysterious Soviet project. The information was frustratingly incomplete. Intelligence sources mentioned a new aircraft under development by the Mikoyan-Gurevich Design Bureau. The designation most often associated with it was F15. Analysts pieced together fragments from satellite imagery, intercepted communications, and human intelligence reports. While the details remained scarce, one conclusion appeared increasingly clear. The aircraft was expected to be exceptionally fast. Just how fast remained uncertain. Rumors circulated through intelligence communities on both sides of the Atlantic. Some reports suggested performance levels unlike anything currently operational. Others claimed the aircraft was intended to intercept America's most advanced bombers and reconnaissance planes. The uncertainty surrounding the project made it difficult to evaluate objectively, and when people lack information, they often assume the worst. Then came the aircraft that worried Soviet planners just as much as the Ye-155 worried Americans. Throughout the late 1950s and early 1960s, the United States was pursuing some of the most ambitious aviation projects ever attempted. One of them was the North American XB-70 Valkyrie, a strategic bomber designed to fly at speeds exceeding Mach 3. The Valkyrie represented a terrifying possibility for Soviet air defenses. If deployed in large numbers, it could potentially penetrate Soviet airspace faster than existing interceptors could respond. Even more concerning for Moscow were America's secret reconnaissance programs. Aircraft such as the A-12 and eventually the SR-71 Blackbird demonstrated that the United States was pushing the boundaries of speed and altitude further than ever before. Soviet planners understood a simple reality. If they wanted to defend their airspace against future American aircraft, they needed something capable of flying incredibly fast and incredibly high. The answer would eventually become the MiG-25. The aircraft's mission was straightforward in theory, even if achieving it proved extraordinarily difficult. It needed to take off quickly, climb rapidly, reach extreme altitudes, and intercept high-speed intruders before they could complete their missions. To accomplish this, Soviet engineers focused heavily on speed and power. What emerged was unlike anything Western observers had seen before. The aircraft was enormous for a fighter. Its twin-engine design featured massive air intakes and equally massive exhaust nozzles. The fuselage looked more like a missile with wings than a traditional fighter aircraft. Every aspect of the design appeared focused on raw performance, and that performance would soon become the source of one of the biggest intelligence scares of the Cold War. In 1965, reports began emerging that Soviet test pilots were already setting impressive speed records with prototypes related to the Ye-155 program. While details remained scarce, these reports further fueled speculation about the aircraft's capabilities. Analysts struggled to determine whether the rumors were exaggerated or accurate. Then, in 1967, the mystery finally appeared before the world. At the October Revolution Air Show in Moscow, Western observers witnessed something extraordinary. Near the end of the event, several examples of the new Soviet aircraft made their appearance. Cameras captured images from every possible angle. Intelligence officers studied every detail. Aviation experts immediately began debating what they had just seen. The aircraft looked enormous. Its engines appeared gigantic. Its wings stretched far wider than many contemporary fighters. To Western analysts, the implications seemed obvious. Large engines suggested tremendous speed. Large wings suggested excellent maneuverability. Combined together, those characteristics pointed toward an aircraft unlike anything currently fielded by either side. The photographs quickly made their way to intelligence agencies throughout the West. And once again, the lack of reliable information allowed assumptions to flourish. Analysts began conducting performance estimates using photographs and observed dimensions. Some calculations suggested the aircraft could exceed Mach 3. Others estimated extremely high service ceilings. The sheer size of the aircraft led many to believe it could carry substantial fuel loads and heavy weapons. But perhaps the most alarming conclusion involved maneuverability. The MiG-25's wing area appeared massive compared to many existing fighters. Some analysts interpreted this as evidence that the aircraft combined incredible speed with exceptional agility. If true, it represented a revolutionary leap in fighter design. Suddenly, worst-case scenarios became common. What if the Soviets had developed a fighter faster than anything America possessed? What if it could also outmaneuver American aircraft? What if it could intercept bombers, defeat fighters, and dominate future air battles? Inside military circles, these questions generated serious concern. The aircraft eventually received its NATO reporting name, Foxbat. It sounded intimidating, and to many American planners, the aircraft itself seemed even more intimidating. The timing could hardly have been worse. At that exact moment, the United States was learning painful lessons in Southeast Asia. The Vietnam War had exposed weaknesses that many military planners had not anticipated. American fighters often entered combat with superior technology, superior speed, and superior missiles. Yet victories did not always come easily. The F-4 Phantom was one of the most capable fighters in the world, but combat experience revealed important truths about air warfare. Dogfights still mattered, maneuverability still mattered, pilot training still mattered. Technology alone could not guarantee success. As these lessons accumulated, the emergence of the Foxbat added a new layer of anxiety. If America was already facing challenges against older Soviet-designed aircraft, what would happen if the Soviet Union introduced a fighter that represented a generation leap forward? Some analysts feared the answer, others began demanding a response, and that response would eventually become known as the FX program. The goal was ambitious. America needed a fighter that could dominate the skies for decades, not merely compete, dominate. Military planners wanted an aircraft capable of defeating any known threat while retaining enough growth potential to counter threats that hadn't even appeared yet. Speed mattered, weapons mattered, radar mattered. But perhaps most importantly, the aircraft needed to excel in air-to-air combat. The challenge facing American engineers was enormous. Because while they worked on their designs, the legend of the Foxbat continued growing. Every new report seemed to make the Soviet aircraft appear even more dangerous. Every new estimate suggested greater capabilities. Every new rumor increased pressure on the men tasked with building America's answer. The pressure inside Washington only intensified after the Foxbat's public debut. Every new piece of information seemed to confirm the worst fears. Analysts reviewed photographs endlessly. Intelligence agencies compared radar data from multiple sources. Aviation experts attempted to calculate performance figures based on wing area, engine size, climb rates, and visual observations. Yet every calculation seemed to point toward the same disturbing conclusion. The Soviet Union might have created the most capable fighter aircraft ever seen. What made the situation particularly alarming was the context in which it occurred. The United States Air Force was still absorbing painful lessons from Vietnam. American pilots had entered that conflict with confidence. Their aircraft were faster, more technologically advanced, and equipped with sophisticated missiles. Yet reality had proven far more complicated. Soviet-designed fighters, such as the MiG-17 and MiG-21, repeatedly demonstrated that maneuverability and pilot skill remained critical factors in aerial combat. American assumptions about the future of air warfare had been challenged in dramatic fashion. The idea that speed and missile technology alone would guarantee victory had been shattered. Air combat was still a brutal contest of positioning, energy management, training, and aircraft performance. As a result, when the MiG-25 appeared, American planners feared they were witnessing the arrival of an aircraft that combined the best of both worlds. If the Foxbat truly possessed its reported speed, altitude performance, and maneuverability, it could potentially dominate every existing fighter in the Western arsenal. This possibility created enormous pressure on the Air Force's ongoing fighter development efforts. Fortunately for the United States, plans for a next-generation fighter were already underway. The FX program had been established to identify and develop an aircraft capable of ensuring American air superiority well into the future. Yet, after the Foxbat appeared, the mission took on new urgency. No longer was the Air Force simply designing for hypothetical future threats. Now, there appeared to be a very real Soviet aircraft that demanded an answer. The competition to create that answer attracted some of America's most talented aerospace engineers. Multiple companies submitted proposals, each attempting to convince the Air Force that they possessed the solution. Ultimately, McDonnell Douglas secured the contract. Their design would become the aircraft known around the world as the F15 Eagle. From its earliest stages, the Eagle represented a radical departure from many prevailing trends. Rather than trying to serve multiple missions equally well, the aircraft focused relentlessly on one objective: air superiority. Everything about the design reflected this singular purpose. The Eagle would not compromise its ability to dominate enemy fighters. Every decision, every component, every engineering trade-off revolved around winning aerial combat. The aircraft's designers understood that future air battles would require far more than raw speed. Speed mattered, certainly, but so did acceleration, so did climb rate, so did energy retention during hard maneuvers, so did visibility from the cockpit, so did radar performance. The goal was not simply to create a fast aircraft. The goal was to create an aircraft capable of controlling every aspect of an aerial engagement. To achieve this, McDonnell Douglas designed the Eagle around two extraordinarily powerful Pratt and Whitney F100 afterburning turbofan engines. Together, they generated enormous amounts of thrust. The aircraft's aerodynamic design complemented this power perfectly. Wide wing routes generated additional lift. The large wings provided excellent control authority. The overall airframe balanced stability with agility in ways few fighters had previously achieved. The result was something remarkable. The Eagle possessed a thrust-to-weight ratio that approached and eventually exceeded 1-to-1 under certain conditions. This meant the aircraft could effectively accelerate while climbing vertically. Pilots would later describe situations where the Eagle seemed less like a conventional fighter and more like a rocket with wings attached. Few aircraft in the world could match its combination of power and agility. Yet, while American engineers continued refining the Eagle, events overseas seemed to reinforce concerns about the Foxbat. In March 1971, Israeli radar operators detected Soviet-operated MiG-25s conducting flights over the Middle East. The performance figures recorded during these missions appeared astonishing. Reports indicated speeds exceeding Mach 3 and altitudes approaching or surpassing 80,000 feet. Israeli fighters scrambled repeatedly in attempts to intercept the mysterious aircraft, but they failed every time. The Foxbat simply flew too high and too fast. To Western observers, these incidents seemed to validate years of alarming assessments. The Soviet superfighter appeared real, and perhaps even more capable than originally feared. Inside intelligence circles, concerns reached new heights. If the Foxbat could operate routinely at such extreme speeds and altitudes, what else might it be capable of? Could it outperform American fighters in combat? Could it evade interception entirely? Could Soviet engineers have achieved breakthroughs that the West had somehow missed? The uncertainty remained enormous, and uncertainty during the Cold War often produced worst-case assumptions. As development continued, the Eagle's first flight finally arrived. On July 27, 1972, the prototype F-15 took to the skies for the first time. The flight represented a major milestone not only for McDonnell Douglas but also for the Air Force itself. Years of design work, engineering analysis, testing, and development had culminated in a machine that embodied America's answer to perceived Soviet advances. Initial results were extremely encouraging. The aircraft demonstrated exceptional handling characteristics. Pilots praised its responsiveness. Engineers observed performance figures that met or exceeded expectations. The Eagle possessed tremendous acceleration, excellent climb performance, and outstanding maneuverability. Yet, despite these successes, many observers still focused on one uncomfortable reality. The Eagle could not match the Foxbat's advertised top speed, nor could it match the Foxbat's reported maximum altitude. On paper, this seemed troubling. The MiG-25 reportedly exceeded Mach 3. The Eagle was generally limited to around Mach 2.5. The Foxbat reportedly operated near 90,000 feet. The Eagle's practical ceiling was significantly lower. To critics, these comparisons suggested America might still be behind. But combat aviation has never been a simple contest of maximum numbers. A fighter aircraft rarely spends its time operating at absolute top speed. Real aerial combat involves turning, climbing, descending, accelerating, decelerating, tracking targets, managing energy, and positioning for weapons employment. The decision made sense from the Soviet perspective. Titanium was expensive, difficult to manufacture in large quantities, and complicated to work with. Steel offered a cheaper and more practical alternative. The downside, however, was weight. The MiG-25 was significantly heavier than many Western analysts had estimated. Suddenly, assumptions about its maneuverability began to look questionable. The surprises continued. The aircraft's electronics appeared surprisingly primitive compared to what many experts had anticipated. Instead of sophisticated transistor-based systems common in advanced Western designs, large portions of the Foxbat's avionics relied on vacuum tube technology. To modern observers, that might sound outdated, but Soviet engineers had practical reasons for making that choice. Vacuum tubes were more resistant to electromagnetic interference generated by potential nuclear detonations. They were rugged and reliable under certain operating conditions. Still, the discovery shattered another myth. This was not a flying laboratory filled with futuristic electronics. In many ways, the Foxbat systems reflected practical engineering decisions rather than technological superiority. Then, analysts turned their attention to the engines. For years, stories about the MiG-25's incredible speed had fueled fears throughout the West. Reports of Mach 3 flights had become legendary. Israeli radar operators had tracked aircraft moving at astonishing speeds. Intelligence briefings described performance levels that seemed almost unbelievable. The truth proved far more complicated. The Foxbat's giant Tumansky R-15 engines were undeniably powerful. They generated enormous thrust and allowed the aircraft to achieve extraordinary speeds. However, those speeds came with significant costs. The engines were never intended for prolonged operation beyond certain limits. Flying faster than approximately Mach 2.8 could cause severe wear and damage. In some cases, engines effectively destroyed themselves after operating at extreme speeds. Analysts eventually learned that some of the famous Mach 3 flights used to demonstrate the Foxbat's capabilities had come at a steep price. Aircraft that exceeded those limits often required major maintenance afterward. In certain situations, the engines had to be completely replaced. Suddenly, the image of an unstoppable Mach 3 superfighter began to crumble. The Foxbat could indeed fly extraordinarily fast, but it could not do so casually, and it certainly could not sustain such performance indefinitely. Perhaps the most important revelation involved the aircraft's intended mission. For years, many Western experts had assumed the MiG-25 was designed as an air superiority fighter capable of dominating aerial combat. Its massive wings, powerful engines, and intimidating appearance had encouraged that conclusion. Yet, as analysts studied the aircraft more closely, they realized something crucial. The Foxbat had never been designed to win dogfights. Its primary purpose was interception. The Soviet Union had built the aircraft to defend its vast airspace against threats such as high-speed bombers and reconnaissance aircraft. The Foxbat's mission was straightforward: take off quickly, climb rapidly, reach extreme altitude, intercept incoming targets, launch missiles, and return home. Maneuverability was secondary. Close-range combat was not its specialty. It existed to solve a very specific problem. And for that mission, it was exceptionally effective. But that did not make it the all-purpose superfighter many had imagined. In one sense, the Soviet Union had become a victim of its own secrecy. By hiding so much information about the aircraft, it had unintentionally encouraged Western intelligence agencies to assume the best possible performance in every category. The less information available, the more room there was for imagination. The Foxbat became a legend partly because nobody knew its limitations. Now, those limitations were visible, and they changed everything. The realization spread quickly throughout defense circles. The terrifying Soviet aircraft that had influenced years of planning, billions of dollars in spending, and countless intelligence assessments was not actually superior to America's newest fighter. In fact, many experts now concluded that the F-15 Eagle was clearly the more capable combat aircraft. The Eagle possessed advantages in maneuverability, advantages in radar performance, advantages in pilot visibility, advantages in weapons integration, advantages in overall air combat flexibility. The aircraft America had built to counter the Foxbat had evolved into something greater than originally intended. Ironically, the intelligence failure that overestimated the MiG-25 may have contributed directly to the Eagle's success. Had American planners fully understood the Foxbat from the beginning, they might have accepted a less ambitious design. The Israeli Air Force had long prioritized air superiority. Surrounded by hostile neighbors and facing constant security challenges, Israeli military planners understood the importance of controlling the skies. When the Eagle entered Israeli service, pilots quickly recognized the aircraft's potential. They would soon have opportunities to prove it. During the late 1970s and early 1980s, tensions throughout the Middle East produced multiple aerial confrontations. Israeli F-15 pilots frequently found themselves facing Soviet-designed fighters operated by neighboring air forces. These encounters provided the perfect opportunity to evaluate the Eagle under real combat conditions. The results were remarkable. Israeli Eagles began accumulating victories, then more victories, then even more. Enemy fighters fell from the sky while the Eagles continued returning home, again and again, mission after mission, engagement after engagement. The aircraft demonstrated an ability to dominate aerial combat that exceeded even optimistic expectations. Pilots praised its situational awareness, its power, and its reliability. They described feeling confident in engagements that might have seemed dangerous in older aircraft. The Eagle gave them options. It gave them advantages. Most importantly, it gave them results. As victory totals climbed, a pattern emerged. The Eagle was not simply succeeding, it was overwhelming opponents. By the early 1980s, the F-15 Eagle was no longer an experimental answer to a feared Soviet threat. It was becoming something much more important. Every successful mission, every training exercise, and every combat engagement reinforced the same conclusion. The Eagle was one of the most capable fighters ever built. What had started as America's response to uncertainty was rapidly evolving into a standard by which other fighters would be judged. One of the defining moments in the Eagle's combat history came during the conflicts that unfolded across the Middle East. Israeli pilots repeatedly found themselves facing large numbers of Soviet-designed aircraft, including MiG-21s, MiG-23s, and other fighters that had formed the backbone of numerous air forces throughout the region. These were not theoretical battles conducted in classrooms or simulation centers. These were real aerial engagements where a single mistake could cost a pilot his life. Again and again, the Eagle proved superior. Its powerful radar allowed pilots to identify threats at long range. Its missiles provided deadly reach. Its incredible acceleration allowed pilots to dictate the terms of engagement. And when fights became visual, the aircraft's maneuverability gave pilots the confidence to aggressively pursue their opponents. The victories accumulated steadily, and before long, military observers around the world began noticing something extraordinary. The Eagle wasn't merely surviving combat, it was dominating it. One engagement after another added to the aircraft's growing reputation. Enemy pilots quickly learned that facing an F-15 was unlike facing older Western fighters. The Eagle combined multiple advantages into a single platform. It could detect you first, it could reach you first, it could fire first. And if the fight somehow moved into a turning engagement, it could often outperform you there as well. Few aircraft in aviation history have entered service with such a complete package of strengths. As impressive as the Eagle's combat record became, perhaps no story better demonstrated the aircraft's incredible engineering than an incident that occurred during a training exercise in 1983. Israeli Air Force pilot Zivi Nedivi was participating in an air combat training mission when disaster struck. During a mock dogfight, his F-15 collided with another aircraft. The impact was catastrophic. The Eagle lost nearly its entire right wing. Under normal circumstances, such damage should have been fatal. Virtually every pilot who has ever flown understands that wings generate lift. Remove most of one wing, and the aircraft should become uncontrollable. The expected outcome was obvious: crash. Yet, something extraordinary happened. Nedivi initially didn't even realize how severe the damage was. The Eagle remained airborne. The enormous thrust generated by its engines allowed the aircraft to compensate for the missing lift. Flying at extremely high speed and using every bit of skill he possessed, Nedivi managed to maintain control. Then he did the impossible. He landed the aircraft. When ground crews examined the fighter afterward, they were stunned. The aircraft had essentially returned home with one wing. Engineers who later reviewed the incident concluded that the Eagle's unique design, combined with its tremendous power, had made survival possible under circumstances that seemed almost unbelievable. The story spread rapidly throughout aviation circles. It became legend. As the decade progressed, the Cold War continued. The Soviet Union remained America's primary strategic rival, and countless military planners on both sides prepared for the possibility of a conflict that everyone hoped would never occur. Yet while politicians debated and diplomats negotiated, the Eagle continued building its reputation. Then came 1991. Operation Desert Storm would provide the largest and most visible demonstration of American air power since Vietnam. When Iraq invaded Kuwait in 1990, an international coalition assembled to reverse the occupation. The operation that followed would showcase some of the most advanced military technology ever deployed in combat. Among the aircraft tasked with establishing air superiority over Iraq was the F-15 Eagle. If there had been any lingering doubts about the aircraft's effectiveness, Desert Storm erased them. Coalition pilots entered the conflict facing an Iraqi air force equipped with numerous Soviet-designed aircraft, including MiG-29s, MiG-25s, MiG-23s, and Mirage fighters acquired from France. On paper, some of these aircraft appeared formidable. Iraqi pilots possessed modern equipment and years of training, but the outcome was devastatingly one-sided. The Eagle dominated. American F-15 pilots achieved air-to-air victories at a pace rarely seen in modern warfare. Advanced radar systems, superior training, and exceptional aircraft performance combined to create overwhelming advantages. Iraqi aircraft were detected, tracked, and engaged before many pilots even realized they were under attack. The skies over Iraq became a demonstration of what happens when technology, training, doctrine, and aircraft design all align. Victory followed victory, sortie after sortie, engagement after engagement. The Eagle delivered exactly what it had been designed to deliver: air superiority. By the end of the conflict, the aircraft's reputation had reached new heights. Pilots trusted it completely. Military planners viewed it as indispensable. Aviation enthusiasts regarded it as one of the greatest fighters ever built. And perhaps most impressively, the numbers continued growing. More victories, more successful missions, more evidence supporting its legendary status. As years turned into decades, the Eagle's combat record became almost difficult to believe. More than 100 confirmed air-to-air victories, 0 air-to-air combat losses. Think about that for a moment. Military aviation history is filled with famous fighters. Aircraft like the Spitfire, the Mustang, the Sabre, and the Phantom all earned places in history through the extraordinary service. Yet, even among these legendary machines, the Eagle occupies a category of its own. 100 victories, no defeats in aerial combat. No fighter achieves that record through luck. That record exists because every aspect of the aircraft was optimized for success. The radar, the engines, the weapon systems, the cockpit visibility, the aerodynamic design, the training philosophy built around it. Everything worked together to create an aircraft capable of consistently outperforming its opponents. Meanwhile, the aircraft that had inspired its creation faded into a very different legacy. The MiG-25 remained an impressive machine. It was extraordinarily fast. It could reach altitudes few aircraft could match. As an interceptor, it fulfilled the mission for which it had been designed. Yet, history ultimately remembered the Foxbat less for what it accomplished and more for what people believed it could accomplish. Its legend had been larger than reality. The Eagle's story unfolded in the opposite direction. Reality became larger than the legend. Every year of service seemed to add another remarkable chapter. Pilots discovered new ways to exploit its strengths. Engineers introduced upgrades. New radar systems enhanced its capabilities. Improved weapons increased its effectiveness. The aircraft evolved without abandoning the philosophy that made it successful in the first place. Even as stealth technology transformed modern air warfare, the Eagle refused to disappear. Many aircraft enjoy brief periods of relevance before being replaced. The F-15 endured. New variants extended its service life. Modern avionics transformed its capabilities. Powerful sensors and advanced weapons ensured it remained relevant even as newer fighters entered service. While aircraft such as the F-22 Raptor and F-35 Lightning II represented the future, the Eagle continued proving that exceptional design never truly becomes obsolete. Today, the latest version, the F-15 EX Eagle II, stands as living proof of that principle. More than 50 years after the original Eagle first took flight, the aircraft remains in production. Think about how remarkable that is. Entire generations of aircraft have come and gone. Governments have changed. Wars have begun and ended. Technologies once considered revolutionary have become outdated. Yet the Eagle remains. Not because of nostalgia, not because of tradition, but because it still works. It still delivers performance. It still commands respect. And it still represents one of the most successful fighter designs ever created. Looking back, the irony at the heart of the Eagle's story remains impossible to ignore. America spent years worrying about a Soviet aircraft that turned out to be far less capable than feared. Analysts overestimated it. Intelligence agencies misunderstood it. Military planners prepared for the worst. And because they prepared for the worst, they created something extraordinary. Had the MiG-25 been properly understood from the beginning, perhaps the Eagle would never have become the aircraft we know today. Perhaps requirements would have been less demanding. Perhaps budgets would have been smaller. Perhaps engineers would have settled for good enough. Instead, fear pushed them further. Uncertainty forced innovation. Competition inspired excellence. The result was an aircraft that not only surpassed the threat it was built to counter, but went on to become one of the most dominant fighters in aviation history. In the end, the F-15 Eagle achieved something incredibly rare. It exceeded expectations, it outlived predictions, it validated the ambitions of the engineers who designed it and the pilots who flew it. And while the Cold War that gave birth to the Eagle has long since ended, its legacy remains visible every time one of those twin tails rises into the sky. Because the story of the Eagle is not really about fear, it is not really about intelligence failures, and it is not really about the MiG-25. It is about what happens when a nation refuses to accept the possibility of falling behind. It is about turning uncertainty into determination. It is about transforming a perceived weakness into overwhelming strength. And ultimately, it is about creating a machine so effective that decades later it remains one of the most respected fighters ever built. The Soviets gave the world the Foxbat. America answered with the Eagle. Thank you for joining us on this flight. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next trip. See you later.